Quadratic equations, an introduction. This is Kisembo Academy, and thanks for tuning in. What are quadratic equations? Now, before we get to explore quadratic equations, you need some background knowledge on the following. You need to know how to solve simple algebraic expressions such as this: 2a plus 1 is equal to 2, 2p plus 4 is equal to p, to find the value of the unknowns. You need to have mastered that. Secondly, you need to have mastered how to factorize algebraic expressions such as these on your screen. Now, if you have mastered how to factorize algebraic expressions such as these, then you are good to go as far as quadratic equations are concerned. On our screen, we are having a small boy, about 5 years old. He's urinating. So when he's urinating, he's going to direct his urine up, and that urine will move up and down, forming a curved shape, as you all see. Let's use another illustration. That same boy still kicks a ball. When he kicks that ball, it will move up into the air, reach somewhere, and then it will come back down. In both cases, we get to see that there is a shape that is formed, like a curve. Now, these curved shapes that you have seen that are being formed are called trajectories. Now, these trajectories you have just seen can be modeled by a mathematical function. This mathematical function is of the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, this function ax squared plus bx plus c, this function is what we are calling the quadratic function. For example, right here we are having a quadratic function, 2x squared plus 4x plus 5, and we see that the value of f here is 2, the value of b here is 4, the value of c is 5. In other words, a, b, and c are always whole numbers, and it's always that function. This quadratic function it's called a quadratic function on condition that a is not 0. Now, when this quadratic function is equated to 0, then it is called a quadratic equation. So meaning if I come and equate this thing to 0, then this quadratic function now becomes a quadratic equation. And in this video, we are going to start looking at how we solve quadratic equations. Now, when solving quadratic equations such as these, we are bound to get two solutions, or two values of x as our answer. Now, these two values of x, or these two solutions, are what we call the roots of a quadratic equation. So today we are going to explore, we are going to see how we get these roots with a few worked examples. Looking on our screen is a number, x squared plus 5x minus 6 is equal to 0. We are required to find the value of x. So what we do in this case, we are going to have to first factorize these quadratic expressions. We are going to find the value of x using the method of factorization of quadratic expressions. So we factorize. So in factorizing this expression, we are supposed to find two numbers giving us two terms. Two numbers. One of the numbers is supposed to give us a sum of positive 5, and the other number is supposed to give us a product of negative 6. Where do we get those two numbers from? We get those two numbers from by analyzing the factors of 6. So, what are these factors of 6? Factors of 6, we have 1 times 6. Now, between 1 and 6, if we made negative 1 a negative, we know that negative 1 times 6 will give us negative 6, because the negative and the positive will give us a negative. The negative 1 plus 6 gives us a sum of positive 5. So it means out of all the factors of 6, we shall go with these two numbers, negative 1 and 6. So we come, and this negative 1 and 6 are going to replace this middle term. So we begin our factorization. This becomes x squared minus x, this is minus 1x, minus x, plus 6, this is positive 6, so it is plus 6x, then minus 6 is equal to 0. Then we introduce brackets and factorize out. Common term here is x, so x is outside the brackets into x minus 1. The common factor here is 6, positive 6, so it's going to be plus 6 into still x minus 1 is equal to 0. And so definitely the terms outside the brackets will remain on their own, so it is x plus 6 in its own bracket into x minus 1 is equal to 0. So when we reach that stage, we have factorized this quadratic equation. Now, remember we have a property that any number that is multiplied by 0 is a 0. If you get 1,000 multiplied by 0, or it is 2 times 0, the answer you will get is 0. Now when you look at this expression, we have this bracket x plus 6 multiplied by x minus 1, we get 0. Now if this multiplied by that is giving us 0, it means that either one of these, either this thing is 0 or that is there. Because we are sure of one thing, that if you multiply anything by 0, your answer should be 0. So if the answer here is 0, so either this is 0 or that is 0. So to get our two values of x, we shall say that either x plus 6 is equal to 0 or x minus 1 is equal to 0. And of course, to get our value of x here x will be, when 6 crosses goes that side, is negative 6, and here x is equal to 1. So these are the two roots, or the two answers we are talking about at the beginning of this video. I said that when solving quadratic equations, we are bound to get two solutions, and these two solutions, which in this case are negative 6 and 1, are what we call the roots of a quadratic equation. We have another example, x squared plus 6x minus 16 is equal to 0. We are going to solve that quadratic equation still by factorization. So how do we do the factorization bit here? Still, we are supposed to split this number into 2 so that we create the 2. We are splitting this into 2. How? We are supposed to find two numbers giving us a sum of positive 6 and then a product of negative 16. How do we get those two numbers? We get those two numbers by evaluating the factors of 16. Now among the factors of 16, we have 1 times 16, then we have 2 times 8. Now if you look at 2 and 8, 2 times 8 and 2 and 8, they are within they can give us what we want. So if you manipulate these two to suit this, you find that if we made 2 a negative, negative 2 times 8 gives us negative 16. Negative 2 plus 8 gives us positive 6. So we shall go with these two factors of 16. So these are the ones we are going to use to displace this middle term. So it means after this, our next step is going to become x squared minus 2x. This is positive 8, so it is plus 8x minus 16 is equal to 0. Again, we shall introduce the brackets, and when we introduce the brackets, the common factor here is going to be x outside the brackets into it's going to be x minus 2, then it's going to be plus 8 into x minus 2 still is being equal to 0. So x into x minus 2 plus 8 into x minus 2 is equal to 0. You realize that the terms that are inside the brackets are the same. And so what we do, we put the terms outside the brackets in their own bracket. That is x plus 8 into the terms that are inside the brackets is x minus 2 is equal to 0. So at this point we have factorized this quadratic expression. Now the question is, one of these is 0, because this times that is giving us 0. So either this is 0 or that is 0. So to get the two values of x, we shall say either x plus 8 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. And definitely here, when 8 crosses the equal signs, you have x is going to give us negative 8. And here, when this negative 2 comes that side, we have x as 2 as our answer. Again, we are going to look for the roots of this. We are going to look for two numbers in such a way that when we add them, they give us a sum of negative 7, and when we multiply them, they give us a product of 12. So what are these two numbers? Where do we get these two numbers? We get them by evaluating the factors of 12. So the factors of 12, among others, we have 1 times 12. That's a factor of 12. We have 2 times 6. Then we have 3 times 4. So now when we look at 3 and 4, we can manipulate these to suit this. If we manipulate these two numbers, it can be in such a way that when we add them, they give us negative 7. When we multiply them, they give us 12. If we made 3 negative and this 4 negative, you realize that negative 3 times negative 4 is going to give us positive 12. Then also negative 3 plus negative 4 is going to give us negative 7. So when we add these two numbers, they give us a sum of negative 7, which is that. And when we multiply them, they give us a product of 12, which is that. So these are the two numbers we shall go with, and we use them to displace this middle term. So in displacing that middle term, it means that our next step is going to become x squared minus 3, minus 3x, then minus 4, because this is negative 4, minus 4x minus 4x plus 12 is equal to 0. You realize that negative 3 minus 4x is giving us negative 7. So we put these in brackets, even this one in brackets. So our next step, we go ahead and factorize. The common factor here between x squared and 3x is x, so we put x outside the brackets into x minus 3. Then here the common term here is negative 4. So we put negative 4 outside the brackets into negative 4x divided by negative 4 is giving us x. Then 12 divided by negative 4 is minus 3 is equal to 0. So from that point, we put the terms outside the brackets in their own bracket. So it becomes x minus 4 in one bracket. Then we put the terms in the brackets in another bracket also. In all the three numbers we've just done, you realize that the coefficient of x squared has been 1. If you look at this, the coefficient of x squared here is 1. The coefficient of x squared here is also 1. And the coefficient of x squared here is 1. Now in our next video, we are going to look at how we solve quadratic equations where the coefficient of x squared is not 1. How we actually factorize them. It's going to be more or less the same, but something new. So in our next video, we're going to look at how we deal with quadratic equations whose coefficient of x squared is not 1. Those are numbers to try out. This marks the end of this video. Up next is more of this. I urge you to stay tuned in. For more videos, please remember to subscribe. For Kisembo Academy, this is Arnold Rangakuramya.